A 23-year-old student named Alice Knott sat in her bedroom in the Washington, D.C. boarding house where she lived, doing what she did every single night, which was to study. Now, it was getting late in the night, and there was some cold air coming in through her open bedroom window, so she went up to close the window. And then on her way back to her desk, she smiled at her beloved pet parrot, Polly. Most of the people who lived in this boarding house with her hated Polly. Not only was he really loud, but he bit people and had some bad disruptive habits that pretty much drove everybody who lived in the building crazy. Like right now, Polly, in addition to squawking really loudly, was also pecking the metal frame of the light fixture that it was on, which not only made additional noise, but it also damaged the light fixture. But Alice would not get rid of Polly. She loved Polly, and Polly loved Alice. And so Alice just walked over to Polly, who was still squawking loudly and pecking at this light fixture, and she just told him to stop what he was doing, and he listened, and then a moment later, she went to bed. The next day, just before 1 p.m., the landlord of the boarding house called out to the house to let everybody know that lunch was ready and to come on down. And a few moments later, all the guests appeared at the table, except for Alice. And so the landlord decided they would just go up to her room and make sure she was okay. And so the landlord knocked, but there was no answer. So after trying a few more times and still not getting an answer, they just reached down, turned the knob, it was unlocked, and they opened the door. And immediately, as soon as that door opened, landlord began to gag. So there were a lot of things about Alice's pet parrot Polly that really concerned people. And Alice, who loved her bird, sort of looked the other way when it came to all those concerns. However, there was one thing that Alice should not have ignored, and that was her parrot's drug problem. So in 1899, interior lighting inside of homes was almost exclusively open flames. And those flames were powered by gas. And it would turn out Polly regularly liked to inhale that gas. He would basically get high. When he was pecking at the light fixture, he wasn't doing it just to make noise or to damage it. He was doing it to turn the valve in order to suck on this gas until he basically passed out. But on this night, it was so cold outside, she shut the window, and then she fell asleep. And it was after she had fallen asleep that Polly pecked the valve open, got high on the gas, passed out, and then the room continued to fill with this poisonous gas. So when the landlord opened up the door, the reason they gagged is they were hit by this surge of gas that had been trapped inside the room for hours. And then when they looked inside, they saw Alice's body lying on the ground by the bed, not moving. Alice would die from inhaling the gas. But the parrot survived because he was able to make his way over to the door and breathe in that fresh air. And so the parrot recovered and would continue to huff gas whenever it got the chance. A 28-year-old Russian man named Artyom Sidorkin started having severe chest pains, and at first he tried to ignore it, but it got so bad he could barely stand up, and then he began coughing up blood, and so finally he went to the emergency room. When he got there, even before the doctors examined him or gave him an x-ray, just based on the way he presented to them, being pale in the face and hunched over and very sick looking, they assumed this must be something very serious. So that day they brought Mr. Sidorkin in for an examination, and after talking to him and hearing about all of his symptoms and just looking at him, the assumption was he probably has a tumor in his lungs. And so they sent him in for an x-ray, and afterwards the radiologist looked at the x-ray and confirmed that, yep, there is a mass growing inside of your lungs. And so before they went to just start removing huge pieces of his lung, they told him that they would like to do a biopsy where they remove a small piece of the tissue and test it to see if it's cancerous or not. And so Mr. Sidorkin is terrified, but he says okay. He schedules his surgery. He goes in a couple days later, and the surgeon pulls out a piece of his lung tissue, and as it's sitting on the tray, he looks down at the tissue, the surgeon does, and he realizes there's something hidden inside of the tissue, as if the tissue was like an envelope holding something inside of it. And so he opened it up, and there, growing on the side of his lung, was a small fir tree. It was 5 centimeters long, it was green, it looked very lively, it was just a thriving little tree. The doctors believed Mr. Sidorkin, who was a botanist, had inhaled a seed of a fir tree, and it got lodged inside of his lung tissue. And then as it grew, its pine needles began piercing his blood capillaries, causing him to cough up blood. After the discovery of what was inside of his lung, a spokeswoman for the Royal Botanic Gardens in London said that it is possible for a seed to germinate inside of the dark, damp conditions inside of a lung. but it is unbelievably bizarre. When doctors informed Mr. Sidorkin that he did not have cancer, he had a tree, Mr. Sidorkin was shocked and he said, "I never got the sense that there was a tree growing inside of me." But more than shocked, he was just relieved that he was cancer-free. There is a picture of this tree inside of his lung tissue, but it's a bit graphic, so if you want to see it, go ahead and Google tree in lung and I'm sure you'll find it.